Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and the last time we left Longstreet, he had just finished fighting the First Battle of Manassas. Now, we move into the lull in the Eastern Theater between the week after First Bull Run and the spring campaign the next year. After the battle, sickness plagued the army. Officers and men alike did not know how to properly dispose of sewage, and this led to typhoid fever and other illnesses, taking many of the young men's lives. Longstreet did not avoid the sickness. The last week of July, he was confined to a sick bed, but in less than a week resumed command of his brigade. The brigade expanded to 4 Virginia regiments. It kept the foundation of the 1st, 11th, and 17th, but it would acquire the 7th Virginia Infantry during the Army's reorganization after the battle. Colonel James Kemper commanded that regiment. He was a Mexican War veteran and a member of the Virginia legislature. During the first week in August, Longstreet's brigade participated in a grand review that Beauregard organized for Prince Jerome Napoleon, a nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte and a cousin of Napoleon III. After that, Longstreet and his brigade, along with the others from the Army, advanced on Fairfax Courthouse to block any possible advance by the Union Army from Washington, D.C. By late August, Longstreet would at one point possess authority over 7 brigades near Fairfax Courthouse. To always keep fresh troops at the front, he instituted a series of company rotations so that his troops would not remain in danger for long periods of time. Longstreet even advanced his men to capture Mason's Hill and Munson's Hill, which allowed soldiers to count window panes in Washington, D.C. They were so close. Also in August, Longstreet got another member of his staff, John W. Fairfax, one of the wealthiest individuals in Northern Virginia. Although he opposed secession, when his state left the Union, he offered his services to the Confederate Army as a staff officer. Moxley Sorrell stated that Fairfax lacked nothing in courage, was brave, and would go anywhere, but Fairfax had 2 distinctions. He was the most pious churchman and was a born bon vivant. Wherever Fairfax went, he carried his Bible, an ample supply of liquor, and a bathtub in the shape of a tin hat. Each morning, when duty permitted, Fairfax bathed in the tub, reading his Bible and nipping a bottle of whiskey before breakfast. He kept the book and the bottle in a sock that seemingly never left his presence. Captain Gorey wrote to his mother about Longstreet saying, "General Longstreet is one of the kindest, best-hearted men I ever knew. Those not well acquainted with him think him short and crabbed, and he does appear so except in 3 places. First, when he's in the presence of ladies, second, at the table, and third, on the field of battle. At any of those places, he has a complacent smile on his countenance, and seems to be one of the happiest men in the world." Longstreet enjoyed the close proximity of old Army buddies that he now had in the Confederate Army. Fairfax's ability to acquire whiskey and Longstreet's love of poker brought many officers into Longstreet's headquarters. Jubal Early would often attend these festivities. One officer whom Longstreet had met before the war, but impressed him tremendously as the war began, was Colonel Jeb Steward. Because Longstreet occupied the front of the Confederate Army, he had to work continuously with the cavalry led by Steward, who communicated with Longstreet daily, informing him of enemy movements. Both Longstreet and Stewart were fond of a good story or joke, which drew the 2 men closer together. Longstreet would write of Stewart that he has been most untiring in the discharge of his duties at that and other advanced positions. He concluded by saying, "Colonel Stewart has, I think, fairly won his claim to brigadier, and I hope that the commanding general will unite with me in recommending him to that position." Joseph E. Johnston believed that Stewart unnecessarily endangered the artillery of his command after endorsing Longstreet's recommendation to promote Stewart. Longstreet jumped to defend the young Virginian and insisted to Beauregard that he had the right man in the right place. Afterward, Longstreet wrote to Stewart the following letter: "Yet you should remember that when there is so much at stake, the authorities are of the opinion that too much caution cannot be had. Besides, politics are a little mixed with our cause and actions, so we cannot be too guarded. Don't give yourself any uneasiness about the matter, however, for you have been entirely successful. Rest assured that so long as I can help you, you shall not be depreciated." On September 24th, Stewart would be promoted to brigadier general. Both Beauregard and Johnston admired Longstreet for his abilities and his tenacity, as well as his friendship. Both Beauregard and Johnston thought of him as a friend. Beauregard even wrote to the Confederate War Department asking if Longstreet could be put second in command. Longstreet and Thomas Stonewall Jackson were regarded as the 2 finest brigadiers in the Army by that point, and both men were put forward as candidates to become major generals. On October 13th, both men were confirmed in that rank, but not before Longstreet offered to resign after hearing that other brigadiers were promoted over himself. Beauregard soothed Longstreet's feelings and refused to accept the resignation. Upon being made Major General, Longstreet was given command of the 3rd Division of the Confederate Army of the Potomac. With the Army reorganization, Longstreet and the rest of the Army settled into winter quarters near Centerville. Longstreet's headquarters became a place of socialization. Many of the top generals in the Army gathered there to have a fine meal, a drink, and to socialize. After a party early in December, Longstreet and Johnston left arm in arm after imbibing in alcoholic beverages at the party. His relationship with both Beauregard and especially Johnston put him on the anti-administration side of the internal war between President Jefferson Davis and his two generals, Beauregard and Johnston. Disagreements between the generals and the president's orders, as well as the questions of rank within the Confederate Army, drove these divisions, and Longstreet would oppose Davis's administration in these fights. Despite his stance in January 1862, he was chosen as the emissary to travel to Richmond and meet with the president to discuss the upcoming expiring enlistments and the possibility of a draft. He spent a week in the capital attending the meetings. Only one good thing came out of his visit to Richmond. He got to spend time with Louise and the children, who boarded with friends in the capital. When the week ended, Longstreet returned to Johnston with little encouragement that the administration would help the military situation. Soon after rejoining the Army, Longstreet got a telegram from Louise stating that Scarlett Fever had struck the family hard and the 4 children had it. He quickly returned to the capital to check on his family. On January 25th, 1-year-old Mary Ann died. The next day, 4-year-old James died. On February 1st, Augustus passed away, leaving only 13-year-old Garland. George Pickett and his soon-to-be wife Sally Corbell were with the Longstreets during the entire ordeal. Sally and George made the funeral arrangements, but James and Louise did not attend the ceremony because they could not bring themselves to see their children laid to rest. Longstreet quickly returned to Army life but raced back to Richmond when Garland took a turn for the worse and was nearing death. However, the teenager would recover. When Longstreet returned to the Army, he was changed by the experiences of the last few weeks. He turned more toward the church and gave up gambling. Word got to Johnston that the commander of the Union Army of the Potomac, George McClellan, was preparing to move his 100,000-man army out of Washington, D.C. But what was Johnston to do against a numerically superior foe? He only possessed around 40,000 men. After a conference with the president, Johnston misunderstood Davis's position and began pulling his army toward Richmond.